to the Putting Your Business on the Map podcast. This is the podcast for land surveyors that own or want to own a small business. My name is Landon Blake. I am your podcast host. Let's dive right into today's episode. Hey guys, the title of this episode is The Balance Between Team Member Autonomy and Top-Down Control. The subtitle is Making Room for the Right Type of Mistakes, and we'll talk a little bit about what kind of mistakes are the right type of mistakes. Before I tell you our opening story, I will let you know this may end up being 2 episodes. I'm not sure yet. I've got quite a bit of material in the outline, so I may end up splitting this. Just wanted to let you guys know that right off the top. And then just a couple quick disclaimers. I'm working on my word whiskers. I just said so. Try not to say so like, be patient with me. You'll hear me hesitate. I'm really working hard on that. It's been a super, super tough challenge for me. The other thing I wanted to let you guys know is I don't have all this figured out. So we're going to talk today about the balance between making sure you don't dork stuff up for your clients and expose your business to a bunch of liability and also giving your people autonomy. And I don't want to pretend that I have that all figured out because it's hard to find that balance and I don't have it all figured out. That's part of the reason why we're going to talk about it today. So there you go. There's my 2 disclaimers. Let me tell you a story that happened to me as a fairly young land surveyor. I was working at they were a 40-person civil survey firm. I was in my mid-20s probably. And I had a great boss. I really liked him. He was a good friend and a good mentor. I still consider him a friend. We don't get to talk very much anymore. But I did learn a lot from him, and he was a good boss. I think he tried to be a good boss. He was imperfect like all bosses. But he was a good man. And I appreciate being able to work for him. Our company bought one of the very first terrestrial laser scanners that you could get. It was made by Leica. I mean, this thing was a beast. It ran off like 2 car batteries and it must have weighed 60 pounds. I can't even believe it would stand up on a tripod. This thing was super heavy and super slow, but it was one of the very first laser scanners that was available on the market. That's how old I am. Younger surveyors. So we spent, I don't know what my company spent. I'm going to say roughly $250,000 total investment in hardware, software, and some structured training that we got from the Leica dealer. And one of the kind of heartbreaking things that happened with that technology at my company, at the company I worked for at the time, was that scanner just basically just sat on the shelf in the equipment room and never got used. Now, eventually, our team did learn how to do laser scanning, but by the time we got around to that, I don't know, that scanner sat for 2 or 3 years. By the time we actually got around to it, the technology had improved so quickly that the scanner we had was basically already way out of date. We ended up getting, a Leica C10. We ended up getting another scanner. I think it was a Leica C10. And I remember looking back on that. I remember being super frustrated by that. The basic problem was my boss, he didn't want anybody else touching the scanner. I don't fully understand all his reasons for that. I think it was a technology he was really interested in, and he wanted to be the one that implemented it there. It was fairly new technology and fairly complicated, and I think he was nervous about us making mistakes if he wasn't intimately involved. And I don't know, there may have been some other things going on there. I remember at one point I went in after several failed attempts to get my boss to cut that technology loose to the team. I remember I went in and talked to one of the principals that I was comfortable with there, one of the 3 principals, and I said, you guys made a huge investment in this technology stack, and that investment is going to be wasted because you won't go put your foot down with my boss and get him to delegate the implementation, the learning and implementation of this technology stack. And I remember telling the principal, I said, to be clear, I am not asking to be that person. I was basically the assistant survey department manager at that time, and I was super busy just like my boss. And I realized from my boss's example that I didn't have time either. And I told him that. I said, I don't want to be the one. I don't think I'm the right decision either. I told him this needs to get handed off to a non-management employee, a smart technical person, a surveyor, or even a civil engineer, but somebody that's not in a management position that has the time. You need to give them 3 months to just go figure this stuff out. And I remember the principal looked at me and said, "You're right. That's what we need to do." But he said, I don't have the heart to make your boss do it. And so it sat. That piece of equipment sat until it was no longer relevant, right? It was a heartbreaking thing. And like I said, my boss was a good guy. And now that I'm a boss and I run my own company, I'm more sympathetic. At the time, I had no sympathy, but now I'm a little more sympathetic. And I understand how that might happen, but it's a sad thing and it's wasteful. And I think it's a good example of what happens when bosses in survey organizations, businesses or organizations, don't let go of enough control. My boss wanted to maintain tight control of that technology stack, and our organization and our team suffered because of that. And I think the team eventually recovered from that, that we were able to successfully implement scanning, and I got to learn scanning, and I got to run a C10, and I got to work in Cyclone, and so did other members of my team, and my boss got a little bit of time to do that. But we got set back 3 years probably on the implementation of that technology, and the company wasted a bunch of money. So it's a good example of the danger of not letting go of enough control when you're a manager or a boss or a business owner. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So why did I want to talk about this? I had a few reasons why I wanted to record a podcast episode about this topic, this letting go of control and letting people make the right kind of mistakes. The first reason is I can tell that my people, I say my people, I don't want folks to get offended by this, especially my coworkers that might be listening to the podcast. When I say my people, it's an affectionate term. What I should say is members of our team, because I have a business partner that is also a leader here. But I can tell that our people, I should say our people, our team members are afraid to make mistakes. I would say that is despite some very concrete efforts my business partner Brian and I have tried to take to make them not afraid of mistakes. Despite all that effort, communicating and trying to set the example, I still just have folks that are just really, really scared of making mistakes. So scared, in fact, that at sometimes I think they cover up their mistakes or shift blame for their mistakes or fail to try new things because they don't want to make mistakes. And none of those are healthy behaviors. And when I see that kind of stuff going on in our team, I try and address it. My partner and I talk about it usually, and then we try and address it. So part of the reason, the first reason I wanted to talk about it on the podcast was I can see that it's a problem on my own team. In our team here at Redefine Horizons, I have folks that are afraid to make mistakes. So that's the first reason. The second reason, and this is related, the second reason I wanted to talk about it today was I think in most of American society we have a deep cultural drive or tendency to avoid failure. Not healthy. It's not a healthy drive or tendency. I think in certain parts of the Silicon Valley that is a little bit different, and that's one of the things I really respect about that part of the country. There's a much more open attitude towards failure there, but that's limited to a fairly small geographic region. I think in most businesses and organizations in America, failure has failing at something or making a mistake has severe consequences for people's careers and their ego and their reputation. And I think a lot of that is cultural, and it's a problem, and it's something that we need to change. So that's another reason I wanted to talk about it. And it's a hard thing to change. It's hard to change culture. As I've gotten more experience running a business, I'm trying to think of how I want to word this. I understand now more than I did how powerful culture is and how hard it is to change culture, and this is part of it. We have a culture in America of not wanting to make mistakes, being afraid of making mistakes. And the other reason, the third reason I wanted to talk about it today, and I mentioned this in a previous episode, is this letting go of control and figuring out what type of mistakes were acceptable was a big step for me as a business owner personally. And, I haven't had a chance to talk to Brian about that. I don't think it's as big of a deal for him as it is for me. I think that's just our personalities. That's a positive for him. It's a positive checkbox for him and a negative checkbox for me. I think it's harder for me. Letting go of control at RH meant I had to not be selfish. And I don't think of myself as inherently a majorly selfish person, but I could recognize that there was some selfishness here on my part. And I talked about that a little bit in one of our previous episodes. One of the things I really enjoyed the first year or two that I had my own surveying business was I got to do things my way. And for, 15 or 20 years, I was always doing things other people's way. And, I have some creative impulses and I can be a man of strong opinions. And so I really enjoyed the freedom and autonomy to finally be able to do things the way I wanted to do them, And I enjoyed that. I let a slip there. Apologize. Part of letting go of control, I realized a few years ago, meant that I wasn't always going to have things my way. Sometimes it meant my people were going to do things their way. And that was hard because I like having things my way. I don't regret. I feel like I've done better at this, and I think some of this has been help from my business partner Brian, who points out when I'm too involved or doing jobs that I should be letting my people do. He will point that out. That's part of being a good business partner. So he has helped me, and I've gotten better at this, I think. And it doesn't bother me as much now as it used to. But 4 or 5 years ago, really, I had a hard time. I had a hard time letting go of control. So that's another reason why I wanted to talk about it. I'm sure if it's hard for me, it's hard for others. It's hard for other people, men and women in my position in a leadership role in a land surveying and mapping organization. So what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to give you just a few definitions. I think I've got 3, so that'll be short. We're going to talk about letting go of control. What does that mean? How do you do it? And then we'll talk a little bit about the types of mistakes, type 1 and type 2, according to Jeff Bezos, and good mistakes and bad mistakes. We'll follow that up with a section on teaching your people how to handle mistakes properly. That's a big challenge, and people have a hard time with it, so you have to teach them. And then finally, we'll end, I hope, with some ways you can try and create a culture that allows for the right type of mistakes, the good mistakes. As I mentioned, culture is a very powerful thing in an organization, but it's hard to change. And so I'll share some, I think I got 10 ways or half a dozen or 10 ways you might be able to slowly change your culture, lever some behaviors to change your culture to allow for more of the right type of mistakes. So let's go ahead and give you those definitions. I think I have 3 here. Some things we're going to talk about today. You're going to hear me a little bit when we get into letting go of control, talk about delegating high-value tasks. So what is a high-value task? That's a task that provides high value to the client or to the organization. It's not a routine task. Typically, it carries some risk for the organization, and to properly carry out that task requires knowledge, know-how, and professional judgment. I'll give you an example. Fully resolving a parcel boundary
that's a high value task. Or properly, performing a least squares adjustment of a big control network. That's another what I would call a high value task. Reading and understanding a title report, cataloging the land title, insurance exceptions. It's another example of a pretty high value task. Low value task, mopping the bathroom floor, taking an inventory of the survey supply room, depositing checks in the bank. Now, all those things are important. You want a clean bathroom and a fully stocked survey supply room, and you want your money to get in the bank when you need it. I'm not saying those things aren't important. So just because a task might be routine or low value doesn't mean it's unimportant. There are certain tasks, though, that you do as a business that add high value to your clients or to the other parts of the organization that you serve. Those previous tasks I talked about are kind of periphery or supporting tasks, right? They're not the core. They're not the core ways you add value as an organization. Those tend to be your high value tasks. The second definition is autonomy. We talk a little bit about giving your team members autonomy. What does that mean? It's the ability to work independently without constant supervision and guidance. It's, let your folks go do their thing. With some guardrails, we'll talk about that, and maybe for a limited period of time. But in other words, you're not going to sit behind them or stand behind them or walk with them and hold their hand. You're going to let them go do it. I'll give you an example. I've got a young party chief. I have to be careful about saying that because my partner and I are trying to cross-train our people and not just have field surveyors and office surveyors. But this young man is primarily a field surveyor. When he's in the field, he's a party chief. Learning to be a party chief. And we had a big job come up in Stockton, one of the cities that we work in. It's my hometown. It's a big job. It's a $40,000 job, $50,000 survey. And he was going to do the field work. He'd done similar type of field work. So I got him a pretty good line out. And I sent him to Stockton for a week. Now, I wouldn't do that with a new employee, but he's been with me for 2 or 3 years now, and he's got a good head on his shoulders. He's responsible, and he's a good thinker. He's careful. So I said, here you go. And I sent him up there with his Robin. I sent him up for a week. And they did great. He went up there and executed the field survey. I was super proud of him. Mix of GNSS and total station surveying methods. Processed his data in Trimble Business Center, fixed a couple boo-boos, took good field notes, exported the points. They did fantastic. And I'll just add, while he was doing that, he was training a brand new Robin. It's just a kid that hadn't even been here a month yet. I was so proud of him, right? So that's what I mean when I mean autonomy, right? I wasn't there. I gave him a line out. I talked to him for maybe a total of an hour over a couple days about what we were going to do, and I let him go do it. So that's what I mean by autonomy. And then we're going to talk about in this next section, letting go of control. So what do I mean when I say control? What am I talking? I'm not talking about survey control. So what do I mean? Control means the direction of the work performed by your team. So that can be the method they're using to do a task, the selection of the people that are doing the work, the place the work is going to get done, the structure and the style of intermediate work products or client deliverables. It's all of those decisions that are being made about all of those things. So when I talk about letting go control, what I'm really talking about is letting your team make those decisions within some well-defined boundaries. So those are our definitions: high-value task, autonomy, control. Now we're going to go into the main section, the first main section of the episode, which is, what does it mean to let go of control as a business owner? What does that mean? How do you do it? Why do you need to be balanced when you do that? And why is it difficult to do? So we'll talk about that. That's in our next section. Now, before I get in to that part of the episode, I want to ask you a question. Are you a land surveyor or a civil engineer working for a small city, small county, or a utility company? If you are, I've got a follow-up question. Have you been looking for a way to implement GIS for your surveying and civil engineering data that doesn't require $1 million and a dedicated ArcGIS server in your basement? In my personal experience, talking to other surveyors and civil engineers, there's a lot of companies out there trying to sell you a $3 million GIS solution, usually with some type of ArcGIS software package. You don't need to do that if you want to get started with GIS. You can get started with GIS for your surveying and engineering organization for just a few $1,000s and some expert consulting advice and a great open source GIS program called QGIS. It's something that we use at Redefined Horizons. And so the team at Redefined Horizons can help you do that. If you're interested, they're the sponsor of our episode today. So if you want to learn more about an affordable and simple way to bring the power of GIS to your surveying and engineering team, reach out to my folks. Reach out to the folks at Redefined Horizons. They've been using open source GIS to manage surveying and civil engineering data for more than 2 decades. And we totally geek out on QGIS at my shop at Redefined Horizons. All of our technical people have it on their computer and we use it every day. So we can help you do that. If you're interested, you can find our team on the web at www.rh-survey.com. Reach out to us. We can talk to you about QGIS. So we appreciate Redefined Horizons being our sponsor for this episode. So let's go ahead now and dive into that topic. What does it mean to let go of control? Letting go of control as a business owner or manager basically means delegating tasks. And not just low value tasks, but delegating high value tasks. Remember, we talked about what is a high value task. It means giving team members the authority to make decisions. And you can start small. You don't let them, make the decision about a new office lease or a $5 million project to start. You start small. I'll give an example. I had another one of our surveyors, primarily a field surveyor, a young man. He's only 23. And he was out executing one of our 4 surveys, and he came back to me after working out for a couple days. He came back to the office, and I was checking in with him and his Robin, and he told me, he said, "Hey, I want to let you know, I changed our typical order of operations on this particular section of the job. I did it in a different order, and here's why I did it that way. I hope that's okay." And I told him, absolutely, it's okay. I said, that decision that you made was within the realm of the authority I've given you as the project surveyor and the party chief for this job. I said, you evaluated conditions on the ground and made a judgment call that was within your authority. That's excellent. That's what I want you to do. So that's what I'm talking about. Giving team members the authority to make those kinds of decisions that are within their wheelhouse, so to speak. That's basically it. That's how you let go of control. You delegate tasks, not just low value, but high value tasks, and you give team members the authority to make some of their own decisions. And you think back to the example I gave you in the opening story there of my previous company's failure with the laser scanner. Those are the 2 things we didn't do. We didn't delegate the implementation of that technology, and we didn't give team members the authority to make decisions related to that technology stack. And so it sat on the shelf, it stagnated. So that's what you want to avoid. So I'm going to take a quick breather, and then when I come back, we'll talk about 5 ways you can give team members more control or autonomy. We're going to talk about 5 specific things you can do in your surveying business or organization. And then we'll talk about why you need balance when you do this. When you let go of control, you got to be balanced. You don't want to hang on to too much control, but you don't want to let it all go. So there's something in the middle. We'll talk about that after I take a quick break. What are the 5 ways you can give team members some more control or autonomy? I'm going to run down the list here. We might talk about a couple of these in a little more detail. So number 1 is giving your people the opportunity to customize their role. Sometimes you hear that called job crafting. I think we do a pretty good job of that here at Redefined Horizons. I'm always willing to sit down and have a conversation with people about what their current role is and what they would like their role to be. Now, having said that, we have certain tasks that need to get done and certain jobs that need to get done. So we can't always give people exactly what they want, but we make an effort. We want we want our folks to enjoy their work and to enjoy their jobs. And so we do what we can to try and job craft. I need to remember, we could do a whole separate episode just on job crafting. I'll try and remember to make a note of that. So that's one way. I think it's an important way. That's why I have it number one. I think the most important way you can let go of control is by letting people determine how they're going to contribute to the team and to your organization within some reasonable limits. Number two, giving your people control over their professional development and their career path. So it's related to job crafting. I kind of think of job crafting is letting your folks control what they're doing right now or in the near future. The second thing about professional development, the second way is more about what they're going to be doing a year from now or 2 years from now or 5 years from now. So it's what the future looks like. Again, I think this is something we do a pretty good job of here at RH. We try and get all of our people a professional development plan that's tailored to their unique circumstances. And we have fairly well-defined career path for most of our technical folks. I need to work on this for the non-technical folks a little bit, but we do a good job, I think, for the technical folks. Number three is by allowing them to determine the way they want to get their work done. So how they do their tasks, how they do their stuff. Again, you got to put some reasonable limits on that. Yeah, just an example popped in my head. I've got my partner likes to use AutoCAD Civil 3D for certain types of drafting things. It's the software he's familiar with. We don't use that software here. We're Carlson Survey Shop, but he's been around a long time, and it's probably not worth having him make the investment in learning a whole new survey software. So we occasionally pay for a license of Civil 3D when he has that type of work so that he can just use the tools he's familiar with. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that for everybody. Part of the reason he gets to do that here is because he's a business partner. But to some extent, I try and give people flexibility when I can about how they're going to execute their work, how they're going to accomplish it. For example, I try not to dictate in really detailed terms how my folks are going to take down a field survey or how they're going to draft, the way they're going to set up their viewports on a record of survey. Try and let them figure out how to do that when I can after they've been trained. Number four, to the extent possible, we like to let people determine who they're going to work with. In other words, what their teams are going to be. And we can't always do that. Sometimes the composition of a team, for example, for a particular job or particular client is dictated by the needs of that client and the makeup of the team members. But when we can, we try and let people pick who they want to work with. So, for example, I had a kind of supporting business assignment project that we needed to do, so it wasn't part of our core technical work. And so I went to the team member that was going to lead that effort. And I just asked her, I said, I'd like to, this is a team assignment. It's not for one person. I'd like to get you 2 or 3 other people that can help. Why don't you come back to me and let me know who you would like to be on this team that you're going to lead? And she did. She came back and said, here's the 3 people I would like. And so that's what we did. So you can't always do that, but we look for opportunities to do that. And then finally, number 5, we try and give people some ability to decide what projects they're going to work on, client projects. Again, you can't always do this. Some of it depends on the mix of work you have available at a particular time and what people are good at, what their skills are. But when we have the flexibility, we try and do that. An example, we kind of made this move in the last 6 months or so to assign in a responsible field surveyor for each one of our jobs. Maybe I should talk about that in a PYBOTM Extra, but as part of that change, I went to the fields, primarily the field surveyor that's been here the longest, and I gave him a choice. I said, here's 2 or 3 of the big projects we have going on. I'm going to let you've been here the longest. You can execute any of these jobs. You have the training and the competence to do that. What's your preference? And he told me I would like this project. And so that's what we did. So we try and do that when we can. Okay, so why do you need balance when you're doing this? it's important. You need balance. You can't just let go of control, fully let go of control. That's why you're there. That's why you're the boss, right? Or the manager. So you don't want to keep an iron grip on things like a ruthless tyrant. You want to let go of control where you can, but there's a balance. I tell people I run a benevolent dictatorship. It's not a democracy. You're not going to get beheaded. I'm not an evil tyrant. I'm a benevolent dictatorship. And so that's kind of how I think about the balance. So why do you need balance? I've got 5 reasons here. So I gave you 5 ways you can let go of control. Now I'm going to give you 5 reasons why you have to be balanced when you do that. Number 1, you can't make everybody happy all the time. Don't try that. It's going to frustrate you. I tried to do that the first couple of years, and I realized it's impossible, and it caused me a lot of unnecessary stress. Instead of trying to make all of your employees happy all of the time, try and make all of your people happy some of the time. And there's a difference. So let me say that one more time carefully. Instead of trying to make all of your people happy all of the time, try and make all of your people happy at least some of the time. What that means is everybody on your team is going to be unhappy sometimes. You can't avoid that. There's, especially as your team grows, it's a little easier when you have 3 or 4 people. When you have 15 or 20 people, you're not going to make everybody happy. It's impossible. So that's one reason why balance is needed. Number 2, you have to maintain high quality services and quality deliverables. So that's going to limit sometimes your ability to let go of control. As an example, most of the fully resolved boundaries here at RH, I'm intimately involved with those. Almost all the land descriptions we write, I'm not intimately involved with all of them, but I look at all of them very carefully. And that's because those are high value tasks that take years and years to get good at. And when you mess those up, it has serious consequences for the client. And so that's an example of a couple areas where I exert a little more control, versus things like, GIS maintenance or, basic drafting and mapping, execution and field surveys. I don't exercise as much control on those things now because we have our team has been trained. Another third reason why you need to be balanced when you let go of control is you have to maintain technical correctness. And that mostly has to do with managing your liability. I don't want to go into the weeds on this, but what I will tell you is if you have good procedures, if you have good workflows or guidelines and build in some peer review and some QA/QC, what that does is that allows you to let go of more control because you're going to catch mistakes before they get to the client. And I think that's important. That could almost be a PYB/OTM extra. Maybe I'll think about doing an extra on that. And it takes work. It's something that I work on here, that we work on here, not just me. My team works on it. So having well-defined guidelines and some QA/QC built into your workflows allows you to maintain technical correctness while letting go of more control. And so that's a positive thing. But at the end of the day, you got to get the client a technically correct product. Now, what I tell people is technically correct doesn't mean perfect. I don't promise people perfect deliverables. We try and do 98% correct or 95% correct deliverables. The world is complicated, and we can't promise people perfection. We work really hard to get as close to perfect as we can, but perfection isn't possible, and it's also not affordable. And it's also not something your professional liability insurance company is going to let you promise your clients. So you want to be technically correct. That's important. But you don't have to telling your people that you're going to maintain control of everything because it has to be perfect. I don't think is reasonable. Number 4, why you have to be balanced when you let go of control is you need to maintain consistent branding. Now, a lot of surveyors, when I say that, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? And that's because a lot of surveyors don't do a good job with their marketing. But I exert a little more control when it comes to some of our marketing, and I have a really smart marketing person now. She's super, super smart and a super hard worker. And I look forward to being able to let go more of that control. But the things about using standard color schemes and our standard fonts and putting together content that reflects our brand and our style and our tone. Now, I am going to look for opportunities to give my team, there are times when you can make exceptions to some of that. So, for example, let's just say we've got an event coming up. We've got an event coming up, and we're going to do like a special purpose website for that event. That might be an area where I say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna give you a little flexibility here. I'm gonna let you deviate from our standard color scheme a little bit. Or I'm gonna let you, put together content that looks a little different from the way we normally do it. You got to be careful there, right? Branding is all about consistency. But again, you can find spaces for your employees to exercise a little more creativity. And you can bend those rules a little bit. But that is one area where, besides the super complicated high liability tasks where I exert a little more control, this is another area where I exert a little more control when it comes to our branding. And that's only because consistency in branding is so important. And then finally, the last reason, number 5, where you have to be balanced is you still need to be productive and profitable. So everything I've talked about today is great, letting go of control and giving your people autonomy. But, at the end of the day, you also have to get some work done. And so there's a balance there. I can't spend every week job crafting because at some point I also have to review legal descriptions and help people resolve boundaries. So there's a balance. There's a balance. At the end of the day, you're running a business, or if you're an organization, you're trying to be productive in accomplishing your organization's mission. And so sometimes you just got to put your nose down and get the work done. So those are the 5 reasons why I think you need to be balanced. I'm just going to run through them again real quick. You can't make everyone happy all the time. You got to maintain high quality services and deliverables. The stuff you provide your clients have to be technically correct. You need to be consistent in your branding, and you need to get the work done. You got to be productive and profitable. But there's a balance. Right? Don't make excuses to be a tyrant. Use those 5 ways we talked about in the previous section to let go of control. Just be balanced about how you do it. And I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I don't have this all figured out yet. I don't always know where the balance is. I tell my people it's like groping around in the dark for your keys. I struggle sometimes. Sometimes I err a little bit on the side of too much control, and then I pull back, and then I realize, oh man, I let go of too much control. I need, and so I'm constantly trying to adjust. And I think my business partner is too. Why is this difficult? That's what I want to talk about in the next section. Why is it difficult for people like me to let go of control? And I told you in the beginning, I think it's easier for my partner in a lot of situations to let go of control. It's a little bit harder for me. But I think it's hard for everybody. There's some degree of difficulty. So why is that? It's comfortable and satisfying to be in control. If you think about it for a minute, there's a gotta watch that. If you think about it for a minute, most of the people that start businesses are going to be fairly, I don't know what the word is. I want to say type A personality, but I don't know if that's the right word. They're going to be they're going to be go-getters, usually. They're going to be motivated, assertive, confident, usually. Usually we're overconfident. That's why we start businesses. And so those types of personalities, they like being in control. So that's why it's hard to let go of control, because you probably, if you're a business owner or a department head or leader of an organization, you're in that position probably because you're good at being in control. You're good at being in charge, and so it's hard to let go of that. Again, a related reason why this is difficult for some of us is we like having things done our way. I'm not gonna lie, I like having things done my way. That's human nature, I think. It's interesting. I didn't think about this until it just popped into my head. It's not in the outline here, but outside of work, I'm pretty go with the flow guy. I think if you ask my wife, I'm pretty go with the flow. I roll with the punches most of the time. I don't really care what we eat for dinner or where we go on vacation. I let my wife decide most of that. That's one of the reasons why I'm happily married after 20 years, relatively happily married. But when I step into the building here that we have in Oakdale, that changes, and all of a sudden I am very particular about how things are done, and I want them done my way. And that's how I'm wired. It's because I'm passionate about surveying and I'm a workaholic. And so I have to work on not always having things done my way. Another reason why this is difficult is because we got to fight our human nature, right? And that's basically what I'm talking about with those first two reasons, right? It's comfortable and satisfying to be in control, and we like having things our way. That's human nature, so you got to fight that. Another reason this is difficult is letting go of control is scary. It means mistakes are going to happen. Yeah, I don't want to sugarcoat that for the listener, for you guys and gals that are listening. As you let go of control and give your team more autonomy and authority, more mistakes are going to happen. Now, we're going to talk about, probably in the next part of this, they're going to end up being 2 episodes, I think. And then in part 2, we're going to talk about, okay, how do you deal with that reality that as you let go of control, more mistakes are going to happen? I think there's healthy ways to deal with that and unhealthy ways. But I'm not going to lie to you. As you let go of control, more mistakes happen. That's scary. I'm not going to tell you that it doesn't scare me. Sometimes it does scare me. And then the last thing is, letting go of control can be hard on our ego. I think I've gotten a little better about my ego as I've gotten older. But my wife tells me I'm a proud person, and I think she's right. It's something I have to actively manage. And if you're not careful, your ego can get in your way. Being the boss and having control and making the decisions and having things done your way, it feels good. It makes your ego feel good. And that's not always healthy. So it's hard. This is difficult to let go of control because to some extent, it takes a degree of humility. I think one of the reasons it requires humility is you have to acknowledge that it's possible that one of your team members is going to do a better job at you at whatever thing you're delegating. I get my feelings hurt here every once in a while because I don't draft topo very much anymore, but every once in a while when I do topo drafting, I get made fun of because people think my topos are ugly. Even though I use company standards, it makes me laugh that my office surveyor that has been here the longest, she makes beautiful mapping products, and she's a much better drafter now than I am. I just don't spend enough time doing it. You've heard me say that before on the podcast, but it's funny when, in a rare occasion when I get to put my hands in a mapping deliverable, and it lands in front of her, she always kind of makes a funny face. And I know it's subconscious. She doesn't even realize she does it. It makes me laugh now, right? But I'm not gonna lie. It hurts my feelings a little bit. So you got to get over that. You have to. And my partner Brian has really helped me with that. Whenever I volunteer in a group discussion to jump in and assist with the drafting or the mapping, he's always putting a quash on that. He's always like, no, Landon doesn't get to draft. And part of it's because I enjoy it. I like to draw. That's one of the reasons I became a surveyor. And he's like, nope, you're not allowed to do that. So it's hard on our ego. That's hard on my ego, But I recognize that I've got, 2 or 3 people on my team now that probably do a better job of putting together a mapping deliverable than I do. And that's okay. It is beautiful and sad at the same time for me. It's also a beautiful thing. So that's another reason. It's hard. It can be hard on our ego. You got to manage your ego. If you're going to be a good boss, a good leader, you got to manage that. All right, let me take a quick sip. So what are the benefits of letting go of control? I didn't number them. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 benefits, I think. You're going to be less tired. You're going to have more time for sleep, right? Bonus. If you're like me and you're a small business owner or leader of an organization, survey organization, you're probably exhausted. So you're going to be less tired as you let go of control. You're going to have more time. More time for your family. More time for high-value tasks. More time for your hobbies. More time for exercise. More time for meditation. It's just more time to live a healthy, balanced life. So that's a super good reason to let go of control. You're going to provide better service to your clients. And part of that's because you're going to be focused on your high-value tasks, right? You'll provide better service to your clients. You're going to be able to focus on your high-value tasks. It's going to be easier for your business to grow, right? As you let go of control, your business scales, and it's easier to grow. Healthy growth, good healthy growth. Letting go of control and giving your team members some degree of autonomy is going to help you attract and retain high-value employees, right? Good quality people, which is a super important part of having a successful business or organization. The people that work for you are going to be happier. Bonus, right? Not just because you're going to hang on to those people and they're going to be more productive, but because you want to be a good human being, and being the type of boss that has happy employees that means you're a good human being. Be a good human being. And in addition, and this is related, as you let go of control and delegate more, your team members are going to have faster professional growth, which is good for them. It's good for your organization. The chances are they're going to look at you as a mentor. I haven't talked about this, I don't think, on the podcast yet. It'd be nice to do an episode on this, or PYB OTM Extra maybe, just on mentoring and the benefits of mentoring. But one of the things I think we do a good job here, Brian and I do a good job of, is we help our people develop as professionals. And we've had a few people leave over the last 5 years. I think most of those people, when they leave, look at Brian and I as mentors and reach out to us even after they're gone for advice. Sometimes they come to our parties or dinners and our parties, and they express appreciation for the training they got and the opportunities they received. And so, that's a non-monetary reward that we get here that I think it's not for everybody, but it's really important to me, and I think Brian thrives on it as well. And so letting go of control means your people are going to develop more fully and more quickly as professionals, and the right kinds of people are going to appreciate that, and it's going to endear them. It's going to endear you to them. They're going to have affection for you because you've helped them in that way. All right, I think I'm going to stop here. I got to be getting close to 45 minutes, and so what I'm going to do in part 2. The next episode, part 2, is I'm going to talk about mistakes, because as you let go of control, more mistakes are going to happen. That's inevitable. Remember, I told you I didn't want to sugarcoat that. I want to be honest with that. So you got to deal with that. You don't want to avoid letting go of control because you don't want mistakes. I don't think that's healthy for you as a boss or for your team or for your organization. You got to let go of control at some point. And that means you're going to have to deal with the inevitable mistakes. So how do you do that? I think part of how you do that is you identify the types of mistakes. There's good mistakes and bad mistakes. One of the things we're going to talk about in part 2, Brian and I regularly tell our team, we're not going to give you an opportunity here to make a mistake that destroys the company. You might make a mistake and it might cost us a little money or set a job back a day or two. Or I'm not saying that mistakes never have consequences, because they do, but we want our people to be comfortable making mistakes, and we don't want them to be afraid to make a mistake. And so one of the ways we try and facilitate that is we don't allow them to make decisions that bankrupt the company. Hey, I can tell you with confidence, if RH goes bankrupt, it's because Brian or I made the mistake, or we made the mistake together. That's the more likely outcome. It's not because one of our people made that mistake. We're not going to give them that authority or opportunity. And it's because we want them to gain confidence making small mistakes. So mistakes are going to happen. You want to try and figure out, as you let go of control, how do you keep the wrong type of mistakes to a minimum? How do you encourage the right kind of mistakes? And then how do you deal with mistakes when they happen? Because they're going to happen. So we'll talk about that in part 2. I think it's going to be close to an hour, 45 minutes or an hour for this first part. So just to kind of review what we talked about today, remember I told you that story about the very first laser scanner, like a laser scanner that my company bought, and it just basically became a paperweight because my boss couldn't let go of control. Right? He's a good boss and a good man and a friend and a mentor, but that was an example of a situation where, for a lot of different reasons, he wasn't able to let go of control, and that set us back and wasted money. We defined a few terms there, right? High value task, autonomy, control. We talked about letting go of control. What is it? What does that mean? 5 ways you can do that. 5 ways you can let go of control with your team. And then we talked about 5 reasons why you need to have balance when you let go of control. You can't just take your hands completely off the wheel. And then we talked about why is it difficult for us to do that as leaders and managers. Some of that's human nature. And then finally we talked about, 7 or 8 benefits of letting go of control for you personally and for your team. So that's a good wrap up. I just finished by mentioning that I know a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot. I know several land surveyors that use Google Earth to manage their survey data. Google Earth is a really great tool. We use Google Earth here. I probably open Google Earth several times a week. But one of the things I really respect about Google Earth and the company that created, they were called, is it Keyhole? I think they were called Keyhole. They were bought by Google. But what I really respect about the folks that created Google Earth is it really brought geospatial data to the masses, right? We never really had an easy to use tool like Google Earth that just allowed people to access huge troves of publicly available geospatial data. And so Google Earth is I have a ton of respect for it. It's a super powerful tool. But I found personally, and I think other surveyors find out, that as you get to a certain scale in your data management as an organization, Google Earth becomes ineffective. So Google Earth is not what I would consider a professional grade GIS tool, right? It's a useful tool, but it has some significant limits. And when you get to a certain point, you're going to want more functionality to manage your geospatial data as an organization. So one of the ways you can do that is with QGIS. I talked about it a little bit earlier in the podcast. QGIS is a really fantastic open source GIS. It reminds me of the old ArcGIS 3.x series, if you remember that. Super cool tool. It's free. Download it today and run it on your desktop. And the really cool thing is Google Earth works with QGIS, so you can import and export KML files. You can import KML files into QGIS, and you can export spatial data from QGIS into KML files, so they work seamlessly together. And so that means it's really easy if you're a surveyor or an engineer and you're using Google Earth to do some of your spatial data management. What that means is you can easily transition to QGIS. So the team at Redefine Horizons, who sponsored this episode, can help you do that. So if you're using Google Earth and you want to think about migrating to a slightly more sophisticated and functional spatial data management tool, I think QGIS can help you do that. It works good with Google Earth. Reach out to the team at Redefine Horizons. They can help you. They have experience doing that in their own organization. They can be found on the web at www.rh-survey.com. Reach out to those folks. Tell them that you're using Google Earth and you want to migrate to QGIS. They can have a conversation with you about it. No charge. They can talk to you a little bit about what you might need to do, get you off on the right foot. And then if you need help with that, they can certainly work with you on some paid consulting services to roll that out at your organization. All right, appreciate you guys listening today. Thank you. We're going to do part 2. I'm going to take a quick break, and I'm going to immediately jump in and record part 2, so it'll be available to you guys, and we'll talk about this kind of flip side of this coin of letting go of control, which is allowing people to make the right kind of mistakes in your organization. As we close out the episode, we just want to give you guys a few reminders. First, we want to let you know where you can find the podcast episodes. The podcast home on the web is at my personal website, landonblake.com. If you head there and look under the Learn menu, you'll find a link for the podcast. That homepage for the podcast has all of the episodes. You can download those in MP3 format if you'd like, or read the show notes. You can also find the podcast on Spotify, YouTube, and Amazon Music. So if those are your preferred, one of those is your preferred distribution channel, you can find the podcast there. We also want to let you guys know, if you'd like to sponsor the podcast, you can reach out to me, sunburn.surveyor@gmail.com. You can also send me questions, comments, thank yous, topic suggestions for the podcast. I regularly get that kind of feedback from listeners, and I dig it. I appreciate hearing from you guys, so I encourage you to do that. We also have a Patreon page. If you cruise over to Patreon, you can search for On Point Workshops, and you will find the podcast there. You can, for a small monthly donation, I believe right now it's $10 a month, you can support the podcast and get access to what we call PYB OTM Extras. So those are extra videos, short audio files, and even full episodes of the podcast.
And that support on Patreon allows me to keep Carly around. Carly is the fantastic young lady that helps me edit the podcast and maintain the podcast website. We'd like to keep her around, so we appreciate your support on Patreon if you're able to do that. And thank you for being a listener.